The suitcase slipped from Amara Johnson's hand just as a black luxury sedan stopped beside her. Before she could pick it up, the rear door opened. Ethan Kang stepped out. Every security guard in the courtyard immediately lowered their heads. Nobody expected the Korean Mafia boss to come downstairs. Not for business. Not for family. Certainly not for a housemaid. Amara stood frozen. For 16 months, Ethan had barely spoken more than a handful of words to her. He passed through the mansion like a storm. Silent, disciplined, impossible to read. Now he was walking directly toward her. His dark eyes moved from the suitcase to the resignation letter in her hand. "So," he said quietly, "you're really leaving?" Amara swallowed. "Yes, sir." The words sounded heavier than she intended. Ethan looked at Daniel Park, his head of security. "Leave us." Daniel hesitated. "Boss." "I said leave." Within seconds, every guard disappeared into the mansion, leaving only Ethan and Amara standing beneath the gray Seoul sky. Neither of them spoke. Finally Amara broke the silence. "My replacement arrives tomorrow." I rejected her application. She blinked. "You, what?" "You heard me." Amara stared at him in disbelief. "You can't do that." "I already did." She tightened her grip on the suitcase. "You have no right." For the first time since she had known him, Ethan looked genuinely unsettled. "No," he admitted. "I don't." Those words surprised her more than anything else. Powerful men rarely admitted they were wrong. Before she could answer, another car entered the courtyard. A silver sedan. It stopped beside them. Victor Choi stepped out wearing a tailored charcoal suit and an easy smile. He looked first at Amara. Then, at Ethan. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Victor smiled wider. "I came to take Miss Johnson to lunch before she leaves Seoul." Amara frowned. "I never agreed to." "I know," Victor interrupted gently. "I thought perhaps you'd change your mind." Ethan took one step forward. "She isn't going." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Is she your employee or your prisoner?" The temperature in the courtyard seemed to drop. Amara looked between the two men. Something wasn't right. This wasn't simply dislike. This was years of hostility compressed into one conversation. Victor slipped an envelope from his jacket. "I actually came to return something." He handed it to Amara. "It's addressed to your late father." Her heart stopped. "My father. I believe it belongs to you." Ethan's voice became sharp. "Don't touch it." Victor ignored him. Amara slowly opened the envelope. Inside was an old photograph. Her father stood beside three unfamiliar men outside a government building. On the back someone had written only 4 words. "Trust no one. Ever." Amara looked up. "What does this mean?" Victor's smile disappeared. "It means your father died protecting something people are still willing to kill for." Before she could ask another question, Ethan snatched the photograph from her hand. "You've done enough." Victor folded his hands calmly. "No. I've only just begun." Without another word he returned to his car. The sedan disappeared through the gates. Amara turned toward Ethan. "You knew my father?" "No." "You recognized the photograph?" Silence. "Ethan." He looked away. "You've been lying to me. I've been protecting you. I never asked for your protection." "No." His voice softened. "You didn't." Amara shook her head. 16 months. You barely spoke to me. You acted as if I didn't exist. And today suddenly you won't let me leave? Ethan closed his eyes briefly. I was trying to keep my distance. Why? He looked directly at her. Because every day it became harder. The confession caught both of them by surprise. Amara searched his face. There was no arrogance. No calculation. Only exhaustion. If this story is keeping you glued to the screen, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling us what you think Ethan is hiding. The biggest secrets are still waiting to be uncovered. Before Amara could speak again, Daniel came running from the mansion. "Boss." Ethan turned instantly. "What happened?" Daniel handed him a tablet. A security camera showed 3 masked men climbing the rear wall of the estate. "They're already inside." Ethan's expression changed. He grabbed Amara's wrist. "We're leaving." She pulled free. "I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me the truth." "The truth," Ethan said quietly, "is exactly why they're here." A loud explosion shook the mansion. Glass shattered across the entrance hall. Security alarms screamed. Daniel drew his weapon. "They've breached the east wing." Ethan stepped in front of Amara without hesitation. "For the next few minutes," he said, never taking his eyes off the approaching danger, "do exactly what I tell you." For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Amara realized the quiet, distant man she had served for 16 months wasn't merely protecting an empire. He was risking his life to protect her. The second explosion echoed through the mansion before the first cloud of dust had settled. Daniel pushed Amara behind a marble pillar. "Stay down." Gunfire erupted from the east corridor. Ethan drew his pistol with calm precision. The quiet employer who had spent 16 months avoiding unnecessary words disappeared. In his place stood the man whose name had made criminal organizations across Seoul think twice before declaring war. 3 masked men rushed through the broken entrance. Ethan fired twice. The first attacker collapsed instantly. The other 2 dove behind a staircase, returning fire. "Take her to the panic room," Ethan shouted. Daniel grabbed Amara's arm. She resisted. "What is happening?" "There isn't time. I deserve the truth." Ethan looked at her for a brief second. "They're here because of your father." The words struck harder than the explosions. Daniel hurried her through a hidden hallway behind the library. Inside a reinforced security room, monitors displayed every corner of the estate. Amara watched Ethan fighting below. He wasn't reckless. Every movement was controlled. Every decision calculated. He was protecting every employee while forcing the attackers away from the residential floor. Daniel locked the steel door. "They won't get through." Amara turned to him. "Tell me everything." Daniel hesitated. "The boss wanted you to have a normal life." "I asked for the truth." He sighed. "Your father discovered that several international crime syndicates were laundering billions through diplomatic aid programs. Before he died, he hid the evidence. My father never told me. He wanted to protect you." "Then why are they following me?" "Because they believe he left you the location." Amara shook her head. "I don't know anything." "We know." She stared at him. "Then why does Victor think I do?" "Because Victor believes pressure makes people remember." A loud impact shook the panic room door. Someone was trying to force entry. Daniel lifted his weapon. "They found us." Another heavy crash. The hinges groaned. Amara looked around desperately. "There has to be another exit." Daniel nodded toward a narrow service tunnel. "Go." "What about Ethan?" "He'll find us." She refused to move. "I'm not leaving him." Daniel almost smiled. "You're the first person who's ever said that." The door burst inward. 2 armed men stormed inside. Before Daniel could fire, another shot rang out. Both attackers dropped. Ethan stepped through the smoke, breathing heavily. Blood stained the sleeve of his black shirt. "Ethan." "I'm fine." "You've been shot." "Just a scratch." He reached for her hand. "We have to leave." They escaped through the underground tunnel leading to an abandoned warehouse several blocks away. Only when the police sirens became distant did Ethan finally stop. Amara looked at the blood on his arm. "You lied." "I've done that before." She tore a strip from her sleeve and wrapped the wound. Hold still. He obeyed without argument. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. I noticed you on your third day. Amara looked up. You remember? You were fixing a loose button on Mrs. Kim's uniform. She laughed softly despite everything. I wanted to fix yours too. I know. You knew. You looked at that button every Monday. She stared at him in disbelief. I thought you never saw me. I saw everything. Then why pretend? He looked away. Because men like me destroy peaceful lives. You decided that for me. Yes. And that was unfair. Yes. Silence settled between them. Then Ethan reached into his pocket. He held out a small object. The loose button. I replaced it yesterday. Amara smiled through tears. You finally fixed it. I realized I was waiting for someone to give me permission. She closed his hand around the button. You never needed permission. Daniel's phone suddenly rang. He answered, listened quietly, then smiled. The police caught Victor. Amara looked at him. How? Daniel held up another envelope. The photograph Victor gave you. Ethan nodded. It wasn't a threat. It was evidence. He explained that Victor had believed he could force Ethan into revealing where the documents were hidden. Instead, the photograph contained enough details for investigators to identify the secret financial network connected to the men standing beside her father. Within hours, prosecutors raided multiple properties. The syndicate collapsed. Victor Choi was arrested before leaving the country. Several weeks later, life inside the mansion became strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, Ethan dismissed unnecessary security checkpoints. Employees laughed openly. Mrs. Kim smiled more often. One quiet morning, Amara stood in the laundry room sewing a new button onto Ethan's favorite black shirt. He appeared in the doorway. I didn't ask you to do that. She looked up with a playful smile. I know. He walked closer. You remember the first rule in this house? I do. She finished the last stitch. But some things should be done because they're right, not because someone asked. Ethan looked at the neatly repaired shirt. Then at the woman who had quietly repaired far more than loose buttons. You were planning to leave. I was. What changed? Amara stepped closer. I realized someone finally saw me. He gently took her hand. I should have seen you much sooner. You did. She smiled warmly. You were just afraid to admit it. For once, the feared Mafia boss had no clever reply. He simply smiled. A genuine smile that only the people closest to him would ever witness. Months later, Ethan transformed part of the estate into a charitable foundation honoring Ambassador David Johnson's commitment to justice. Young international students struggling to build new lives in Korea received scholarships, housing, and legal support through the foundation. When reporters asked Ethan why he had started it, he looked toward Amara standing quietly nearby. Because one courageous woman reminded me that protecting people is far more meaningful than controlling them. Amara squeezed his hand. She had arrived at the mansion believing she would spend her life invisible. Instead, she found someone who finally looked beyond the uniform and saw the woman beneath it. And Ethan discovered that the greatest victory of his life was never defeating his enemies. It was finding the courage to stop hiding his heart. If this story touched you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more emotional stories. And tell us in the comments, do you think Ethan should have confessed his feelings much earlier, or did waiting make their love even stronger? The following Sunday, the mansion felt quieter than it had in years. The shattered glass had been replaced. The damaged walls had been repaired. But something inside Ethan had changed in a way no contractor could explain. He walked into the dining room wearing the same black shirt. Amara immediately noticed the new button. She smiled to herself. You finally replaced it. Ethan glanced down. I had some help. Mrs. Kim looked between them and hid a knowing smile before quietly leaving the room with the other staff. For the first time since Amara had arrived at the mansion, she and Ethan were alone without silence feeling like a wall between them. I owe you an apology, Ethan said. You've already apologized. Not for everything. He pulled out a chair. Sit with me. She hesitated. I work here. I know. I shouldn't. You should. She slowly sat across from him. Ethan folded his hands on the table. When your father died, I investigated the case. Amara looked up sharply. You knew about him all this time? I knew enough to understand he wasn't the criminal the newspapers claimed. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I couldn't prove it. He reached into a drawer beside the table and removed a sealed folder. The investigation is over. Amara opened it with trembling hands. Inside was an official statement clearing Ambassador David Johnson of every allegation that had destroyed his reputation. Attached was a handwritten letter from the lead prosecutor admitting that false evidence had been planted years earlier by Victor Choi's organization. Tears filled Amara's eyes. For all these years, she could barely continue. My father died believing the world thought he was corrupt. Ethan nodded quietly. And now the world knows the truth. She pressed the papers against her chest. Thank you. No. He shook his head. Your father earned this. She stood and walked toward the large window overlooking Seoul. I spent years hiding because of his name. She smiled through tears. Now I'll spend the rest of my life honoring it. Ethan joined her. I think he'd be proud. She looked at him. What about you? What about me? What happens to the Korean Mafia boss now? He laughed softly. I've been asking myself that every morning. Daniel entered with a newspaper. Boss. Ethan accepted it. The front page showed Victor Choi being led into court in handcuffs. Beneath the photograph was another headline. Kang Group announces complete withdrawal from illegal operations. Daniel smiled. The last of the criminal businesses have been dissolved. Ethan folded the newspaper. It was time. People are calling you weak. They used to call me dangerous. He looked toward Amara. I know which one lets me sleep. Weeks later, the foundation officially opened. Students from different countries filled the hall. Young people who had arrived in Korea with dreams and very little else. Amara welcomed each one personally. Mrs. Kim supervised the kitchen with her usual quiet excellence. Daniel handled security, though there was finally little need for it. Near the end of the ceremony, one young Nigerian student approached Amara. I almost gave up before coming here. Amara smiled. So did I. The student looked around the beautiful building. Why did you keep going? Amara glanced toward Ethan, who was helping an elderly guest find a seat. Because sometimes, she said softly, one person sees your worth before you do. That evening, after everyone had left, Ethan found Amara standing in the garden. The city lights stretched endlessly below them. I've been thinking, he said. She smiled. That usually means something serious. It does. He reached into his pocket. This time it wasn't a button. It was a simple silver ring. Not extravagant. Not covered in diamonds. Just elegant. I've spent most of my life buying expensive things. He looked into her eyes. I finally learned that the most valuable things can't be bought. Amara's heart raced. Ethan. I don't want you to stay because you work here. He took another step closer. I don't want you to stay because you need protection. His voice became quieter. I want you to stay because wherever you are, that's beginning to feel like home. A tear rolled down Amara's cheek. She laughed through it. You've become much better with words. I had a good teacher. She slipped the ring onto her finger. I'll stay. He gently embraced her as the garden lights reflected across the city skyline. Far below, Seoul continued its endless rhythm. Inside the mansion that had once been ruled by fear, something far stronger had finally taken its place. Peace. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories. And tell us in the comments, what moment convinced you that Ethan had truly changed, the day he protected Amara, or the day he finally opened his heart?